a people who have been stripped of their faith, culture, and identity. As we speak, millions of Uyghur Muslims remain imprisoned in detention centers and are herded like cattle into concentration camps.
The case of the Muslim Uyghurs of Chinese-occupied East Turkestan demands our attention. Joining us today is Arslan Hidayat, a foremost leading activist on the Uyghur crisis and program manager for Campaign for Uyghurs. A word of caution, however, the following episode will contain themes that are traumatic and confronting for some. I guess before we go into the crux of the conversation, I think it's always important to give a backdrop to the conversation as to who are the Uyghur people. And from what I know, they are the original Turkic people. I mean, they're very rich for their food, which I personally love. I know Brother Kamal loves his Uyghur food.
Huge. I think Uyghur food is the best food on the face
Best
of this
food.
planet, period. No
Big
contest.
Fan,
No
big fan
contest.
of Kori Lagman, Goshna, and all the best. Very rich for their culture and the dress, everything. So, Balasan, please, if you could give us a brief overview of who are the Uyghur people?
Yeah, Jazakallah khair for the question. The Uyghurs, as you've mentioned, are essentially what we like to view as the original Turks. We are geographically located in Turkestan, and specifically the east part of that. So Turkestan itself is a conglomerate of countries. So present day Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, and we are east of that. And the countries that border around us are China, Tibet, Mongolia, Russia, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Tajikistan, Pakistan, India. And we could go into the thousands of years of history from other Turkic nations like the Gokturks and others. But I like to sort of start off with the Islamic history. The Uyghurs were the first Turkic group to accept Islam in the early 10th century under Sultan Sa'd Burahan. And if it wasn't because of him and the Uyghurs, today you wouldn't have the Seljuks. You know, I'm sure you've seen Ertuğrul.
Everyone's a big fan of Ertuğrul, myself included.
The Ottoman Empire. So that's the very, very beginnings of all that. And then throughout the hundreds of years, we've sort of lived in that area. We've had a long history with other groups around the area, especially the Chinese. And in 1884, we are officially annexed into the Qing dynasty. And that is the first time where you get the name Xinjiang, which literally means new land, new border, new frontier. And up until this day, today, it's known as the Xinjiang Uyghur Autonomous Region. We are only autonomous by name. There's no autonomy to it. So to refer to the Uyghurs or our homeland as Xinjiang would be the equivalent to referring as Palestine as Israel.
Quite offensive, yeah. So it's present-day China-occupied East Turkestan. Would that be correct in saying
Yeah,
so?
So we'd like to call it as Chinese-occupied East Turkestan. We do not recognize China as a whole. So if anyone knows how the Chinese map looks like, it's like a bunny, and we're part of that left bunny ear right now, if you sort of picture that in your head. And we don't recognize that shape. So just the same way as Tibetans don't recognize that themselves as Chinese or Southern Mongolians, we do not recognize as being part of China. So the moment that you mention East Turkestan or you call for East Turkestan, you're immediately labeled as a separatist. Well, to be a separatist, you would have to be part of that nation first. We're not trying to separate from China. We are separate from China.
It's I guess there are many parallels between the situation of Palestine and Israel today, whereby many Palestinians would not consider themselves as part of the Israeli state whatsoever. Now, many have dubbed what's happening right now in present day occupied East Turkestan as a genocide. If you can, I guess, give a summary to our viewers right now, what exactly is happening? I know it's prevalent all over the social media, but for those that are still unaware, unfortunately, what is the present day crisis right now?
Well, first we have to realize that this is not a new thing. this is not happening, you would have only heard about the Uyghur genocide and the concentration camps over the past 4 or 5 years. But it has led up to this. So it's decades of genocidal policies that led up to this, especially in the early 80s when China started their one-child policy. So for the other so-called minorities in China, we were given the right to a two-child policy. Now, Turks, Arabs, we're typical for having, large families, 5, 6. I know my grandmother and her generation were having 5, 6, 7 children. Wow. So through that, millions had already been genocided over the past 3 or 4 decades. We've had various uprisings and massacres that have happened. Then you've also heard, even before these camps, closing down of mosques, your beard being illegal, no hijab, no salah, no fasting. And now it's led up to proper putting people into camps. So for example, these recent leaks that we've seen, there are actually more leaks out there that haven't been published. So, but for example, in my family, so my wife's family especially, so my brother-in-law, we've just recently found out through some other leaked documents that in 1999, when he was 9 years old, he was learning Quran from a teacher. And because of this, in 2017, he's been given a hefty prison sentence of what he did when he was 9 years old.
I think you're really seeing the erasure of not only Islam, but also the culture with them as well in these so-called re-education camps. I think it's quite unfortunate that this plight, what's going on, actually, it's not even a plight. That's putting it lightly. This genocide that was happening against the Uyghur people, it's somewhat falling on deaf ears. And despite the evidence that we've seen, it's very unfortunate. I mean, we're talking about like whatever goes into the camps, especially like you were saying, we saw the youngest in recent documents as of today, and Allah, it could have been younger than this, but I think the girl was maybe 7 years old was the youngest, and the oldest was 78. But as we've discussed prior to this, you've also mentioned that this was only from 2017. So this is like a smudge of the larger picture. This is about 2,000 images or so were released approximately, but this is just in one province. Am I correct in saying that?
Yeah, so if we're talking about the recent Xinjiang police files, which is what they've been named, those images came from a couple of months, I believe from January to July in 2018, from one county. And that's only 3,000 images from there. But there are thousands upon thousands of counties within East Turkestan. So God knows the actual number. Now, when we talk about numbers, we can only refer to numbers based on certain organizations or government sectors.
Because there is a lot of censorship. It's too hard to get an exact number.
Exactly. So we can only guesstimate, but especially every single Uyghur person around the world has at least one family member in the camps right now.
Wow.
So that's just
I guess what was concerning for me as well, especially when you look through those images, we're saying 5,000 images within a certain locality, and I guess 2,800 plus were detainees in the prison. But from the other, I guess 2,200 images, from the other 2,000 images, we were seeing children as young as 7, 8, 9. They weren't necessarily imprisoned, but their heads were shaved. We're talking about boys and girls with shaved heads, which were clear indications that they were being sent to the re-education camps. Although they weren't in prison, they were in these re-education camps, which have been dubbed as schools, but we know very well they're not necessarily schools, they're indoctrination camps. If you can, I guess for our viewers, outline to us, what's the difference between the prison and the re-education camp? Both of them are used as part of the system of mass incarceration, but what is the difference? How is, I guess, China differentiating between putting people into camps and putting people into prison?
Well, it's very, very arbitrary. It's not just the two. There are about 4 or 5 different systems. Yeah. So the first system is sort of a re-education school, the type that you do see on the BBC. That's like sort of a 9 to 5 or 10 to 6 system where they're learning something or being indoctrinated. I'm sure you've seen She's Thought book. It's essentially replace the Bible, replace the Quran, and that is, you actually have to try and become a hafiz of She's book.
Wow.
So in any hotel that you see, instead of, if we're in Australia, so in most hotels you would see a Bible. If you're in an Islamic country, you'll see probably Al-Quran in your hotel room. They have She's book there, and every household must have that in there. So you have that type of school. Then you have the detention centers where people are rounded up, and that's full-time education, where you see the shaved heads of the women, and we know that the source of those hairs are being sold all around the world. So they're making. There was a very good report done by Radio Free Asia where they're making billions of dollars, and suddenly between 2018 and 19, there was a huge rise where it was $100 million worth of hair products coming out of China, now reaching up to 1.4 billion.
So I guess that's why the children's heads were being shaved. In the images, you're seeing little children, 8 years old, 9 years old, shaved heads.
Yeah. So with the children, because the parents are all in the concentration camps, these kids are taken to state-run orphanages, boarding schools, and there they are told to, your group or your people are the Chinese, your religion is communism, and from a very young age they are told to hate their own culture and that it's backward, and to adopt these new beliefs. Then you have the actual prisons where people are sentenced, and it's very, very arbitrary. And we've now come to see that this is a war on Islam. You saw people being sentenced for their beards, their headscarf.
16 years for a brother for growing his beard. 16 years just for growing his beard. Another grandmother who taught her kids Quran, religion indoctrination, sentenced to God knows how long. And even as you mentioned, the BBC report, daunting images, very daunting images. If you can't, it's something out of a movie. I think we've become very numb to these things. And if you look at them, China was trying to showcase that the Uyghur people were enjoying their own culture and singing and dancing. But as you said, everyone has Xi's book, which is Xi Jinping, right, the president of China, just for those who are unaware of that.
Yeah. So I know I don't like to make comparisons, but sometimes we have to make comparisons to put things into context. So, for example, when America and in its invasion of the Middle East, and even in Guantanamo, America killed Muslims, right? They killed Iraqis, and they did heinous crimes. But they weren't. It wasn't a war against Islam. They didn't go there to change and I'm not like backing them or anything, but even in Guantanamo, they weren't changing the people. In Guantanamo, they had Quran, they were pray, they had their beads, they had everything, despite all the heinous crimes. But China is waging a war against Muslims, against Islam, against Allah. Literally, you can see in the files, you can see that the way that they have their current zero tolerance against COVID, they have zero tolerance against Uyghurs. They're trying to eradicate COVID. Yeah, and you've seen the images in China under lockdown proper.
They say it's a disease.
So Islam is seen as a disease. It's a problem. They have to eradicate it.
There were actually documents that were released in the previous leak, not this batch of leaks, but the previous leak. They said they have a virus and we need to, I guess, get rid of this virus. Subhanallah, prior to COVID.
Even on COVID, it was mentioned that the Uyghurs were actually making the masks that people wear every now and then, and they had chain links even to places in America and other parts around the world. So they were actually, where you got your mask from, who knows? It could have even been from one of those camps. And especially within the schools as well, as we've seen from the leaked documents of the police documents, there was a shoot to kill policy. So it's not really a school if you're not really free to leave. Who would voluntarily, as they say, people voluntarily going to these guarded gates, fenced up schools, but there's a shoot to kill policy. That doesn't really add up. And I think what we've seen over and over again is that the rhetoric that the Chinese officials are trying to use, it's always deny, deny, deny. And I think you've also touched on a really interesting point on America and Guantanamo Bay. We recently had a guest, Muazzam Beg, who was with us some months ago on one of our latest podcasts. And I think it's very interesting how China's also adapted the war on terror narrative. So I think in order to silence and to kind of neutralize what they're doing, they were trying to say that, Bush and all these other countries and Blair, they were attacking their terrorists, as are we. We're attacking an ideology here. And I think that's really neutralized a lot of the efforts back in the early 2000s. And even in Guantanamo, you had Muslim Uyghurs sent from Muslim countries. Muazzam Beg, he's mentioned to us that there were Uyghurs in the camps with him, and they were later resettled once America found out they can't really do anything with them because they won't charge for anything. But where did they send them to? Non-Muslim countries, to even make them even still further away from Islam as well, which is beyond belief.
Yeah, for example, with Mozambique, especially those deniers, even with our own Muslim communities, Mozambique himself said he was oppressed by the US government, and he's going out and saying that, China is another level, like what the US had been doing or is still doing in the Middle East is on a level, but China is is on another level, even
They're
beyond that.
completely wiping out the people. This is genocide by all means. And while we may not see it because of the, I guess, strict censorship which is taking place, but by now, I guess there's no more room for denying.
No.
We've seen the documents, we've seen the leaks. These people are definitely being persecuted for their faith. They are being absolutely ethnically cleansed from their faith. The children are being indoctrinated to become Chinese and no longer Turkic Muslims or Uyghur Muslims. They're being completely ethnically cleansed from their faith, from their religion, from their culture. And it's very, very daunting. But I did want to I guess, I don't know if this is the time to, but China is at war with Islam against the Uyghur Muslims. But why is it that we see somewhat of a differentiation between the way China treats Chinese Muslims, for instance, the Han Muslims, with the way they're treating the Uyghur Muslims? Why is there a distinction?
Well, right now they are feeling the pressure as well. We've seen Hui. A lot of the images that you see of the mosques being demolished are not necessarily from Uyghur areas. It's from Hui areas. They are feeling the brunt as well. Generally speaking, because the Hui they're actually Han. The only difference is that they've accepted Islam. Because there is they are Chinese at the end of the day. They can still get along, but not bring up Islam.
And Chinese make 90 to 99% of the population of China.
Yeah,
I think that's also, and especially with the Uyghurs, brothers and sisters, they are also culturally and ethnically Uyghur, right? And their region, obviously, as you said, predominantly, pretty much everyone is Muslim in comparison to China's aggressively secular country as well. So that's also a point as to why they see a conflict.
Yeah, and at the same time, they're illegally in our homes. They haven't gone and broken down the homes of Huis. They haven't taken over their land, whereas they've occupied our land. They take our resources. It's a totally different kettle of fish here that we're dealing with.
We're even seeing forced marriages from Uyghur women to Chinese men, which is completely.
So again, for the Australian audience or the Western audience out there, this would be the equivalent of, say, in Australia, they were forcing us to speak English and only English. They were forcing us to adopt the typical Australian lifestyle. And we can sort of guess what that is. So forcing us to drink beer and forcing us to free mix and then forcing us to marry atheist Australian men or women. And then you have, say, the Australian government sending in their officials to live with you. So I'm saying
checkups on the regular, a day they would come in and check and see how you're going. I've seen the videos are just absurd. Like you read another person just checking up on you, seeing everything's okay. A Chinese official in your house, and talk about mass surveillance. I know from one latest study that Al Jazeera found out in a week, 24,000 people were surveillance, and the following week, 15,000 of them were sent into the camps. And I've even heard that houses outside Uyghur Muslim houses, they have QR codes for these officials to come in and check it. It's just, talk about big brothers watching you. They're watching you. Every move you make, they're on you. They know what you're doing. They know where you were and what you're doing at all times. I think that's just imagine somebody following you like that. I mean, we have our Muslim apps that kind of sell us out a little bit, not the OnePath network app, alhamdulillah, but just imagine that mass surveillance on a countrywide, on a scale you can't even think of.
Arslan, you're heavily involved with the Uyghur Muslim community. I guess I'm sure you're very familiar with people that have family members in occupied East Turkestan. Can you talk us through some of their stories? Some of the, I guess, the horror stories that you've heard, just for our audience to share, so they can hear from, I guess, a personal perspective of what it's like for our brothers and sisters there.
So I've had the privilege or the opportunity to talk with some of the former concentration camp detainees, and they were telling me they were essentially starved. They're on some sort of 400 or 500 calorie diet. They eat a gooey mush. Throughout the day, they are injected with certain, whether it be sterilization.
This is the woman.
Yeah, for women, and some of these needles or some of these injections turn people into a zombie-like state. So they end up not feeling anything. They end up not caring about anything. They're literally zombies. Rape sessions where this rape is actually open to the public as well. That they've essentially turned a lot of these camps into brothels. This is based on the testimony of some of our sisters. And then you have for example, we have demeaning forms of torture. So there was a sister who told us of a story where another sister, she was a Quran teacher, and she was stripped naked, and the guards urinated on her. And why they urinated on her, they're saying, hey, don't you Muslims do wudu when you pray? So do wudu with this urine. So things like this psychological trauma. So it's beyond. And sometimes we think, about death. Death would be an escape. Death would be much better than going through this. So it's even, you're not allowed. That some people have been charged, or they've received more punishment for trying to attempt suicide in the camps.
No.
So trying to attempt suicide, you'll get into more trouble if you try and do that.
No. It's haunting. I guess it's very haunting stories we're hearing. We're hearing of women getting raped. These are our Muslim brothers and sisters. I think we need to understand that, especially for our viewers at home. The Prophet ﷺ, he teaches us, the Muslim is like, the example of the ummah is like one body. If one part is in pain, then all of it feels pain. And we hear so many of these hadith, the sanctity of the blood of a Muslim is more holy than the Kaaba. And I think these are stories which we should feel pain over, especially I remember going through some of the images that were in the leaks. And of course, none of the women are wearing hijab.
Yeah.
But I'm sure majority of them would have been wearing the hijab had it not been for the harsh restrictions that the Chinese government is placing upon these people. But when you read through their names, you see like one of the prominent image that went out, her last name was like Tawakkul.
Yeah.
Like have trust in Allah. These are our Muslim brothers. These are our Muslim sisters. And we should feel that pain. And it's sad that I guess, that connection isn't there. And I really urge our viewers and myself first and foremost that these are the people that should be in our dua, our supplications. And subhanAllah.
I think that kind of falls on the lines of kind of a double standard that's at play as well, especially with the case in point in Ukraine. I think Ukraine's also a very interesting case study as to what we're seeing. We've seen chains such as the likes of Starbucks, IKEA, McDonald's, all withdrawing from Russia within weeks. My question to you would be, why hasn't any other country taken this aggressive stance against China? I mean, we understand that China is a world superpower, but so is Russia. China is also a nuclear armed state, which I believe Russia is too. So where do you think that is? Why do you think most of these countries are silent and complicit into the ongoing genocide of the Muslims in Chinese East Turkestan, occupied East Turkestan?
I think we have to call a spade a spade. It's very clear. It's not just with the Uyghurs, but our other brothers and sisters throughout in the Muslim world as well. We're not European, we're not Christian, and human. Like if you're Muslim or you're Middle Eastern, you don't have rights. And for me personally, I've come to that level. I used to be very idealistic and very utopic. Let's go to the UN, let's do this, let's fight for that. And now it's just a stage where our countries, our 50 odd nations, so-called Muslim states are in the UN and in various bodies, but in practice, they can't do anything. And the UN itself won't do anything for us as well. So I'm sort of stumped as to what can be done. To be honest, as Muslims, as Muslim majority states, we do have to go back to Islam, back to the Sunnah.
Go back to the hadith of the Prophet to become like a true one body.
Exactly.
Which unfortunately,
and but we've placed our trust in these organizations. Our tax dollars, billions of it, goes to places like the UN, and nothing is done. And we've recently seen Michelle Bachelet, the UN human rights chief there. She's supposed to be doing an investigation, but as soon as she set foot and she was right in front of the Chinese officials, no, this is no investigation. We're just visiting. It's all cool. We're here to promote human rights together. That would be the equivalent of if the UN human rights chief sat in front of Hitler and said, we're going to promote human rights with the Nazi regime.
And she's going to go on a guided tour, which is going to be polished and glamorized and made to look as though everything is fine. I remember one of the journalists, he went inside the concentration camp, re-education camp, quote unquote.
Yeah.
And he went and he saw everything is fine. Everything's lovely. But he goes, when he went into the toilet, what did he see written on the wall? In Turkic, it was written, "Oh my heart, do not break."
Yeah,
Subhanallah.
Yeah.
So in the toilet, when everything's, I guess there's a privacy.
For 2 minutes. I've heard testimonies.
He sees the reality.
2 minutes, and that's
so
it.
Forget whatever China says. Forget whatever front, whatever camera lights and action they want to, I guess, put on display for the people. but the truth is there. The truth is apparent. And I guess we are at a time right now where you can no longer deny what is happening. And I guess it's so sad to see non-Muslims, but of course Muslims themselves that are denying what is taking place. And I guess this is perhaps because of a double standard that they see. They say, how can you support the Uyghur Muslims when we have America supporting them? This is, in my honest opinion, this is stupidity. This is absolute stupidity. We're not people who determine our principles based on factions or based on the stances of nations. We are people who determine our principles based on facts, principles, and I guess this is very sad to see.
But yeah, for example, with these files, we're lucky enough that these files have been leaked. Most, if not all, of the files that the Nazis had kept were released only after the Holocaust, after the war. And then people realized.
This is ongoing. And now they've been released currently as events are taking place.
So there are people within the Chinese regime sending us these leaks, or in this case, it was hacked. But there are people realizing that this is not right and trying to get the information out there so that people can do, so action can be taken. We have to literally arms. If we're talking about Ukraine, arms were sent to the people. There was a foreign legion, ready to fight. And the moment a Muslim talks about fighting or tries to defend themselves, automatically you're a terrorist.
I would ask you on that point. The events are real. We've seen they're very real events, tragic events. And for those who feel helpless in this situation, we see that these events are atomized. But to those who feel they're helpless and feel they can't do anything, I mean, we've seen people spread news and information on social media and so on and so forth. But my direct question to you would be, is silence complicity in the ongoing Uyghur genocide?
Yeah, definitely. If you're an organization or a sporting team or a conglomerate that used to speak on other issues, for example, Ukrainian invasion, Black Lives Matter, or some other, and then you are silent on this, of course you're complicit.
If you want to be morally just, you have to be morally just on all playing fields, I think, right? In all cases.
Exactly. Yeah. So again, you mentioned the brands and the Starbucks and many other brands, YouTube, Facebook, everyone pulling out of Russia. But you're sticking around in China. So even people, we try to push that message that Russia was only able to invade, with getting off topic, but Russia was only able to invade Ukraine because of China's support. Russia is standing up economically because China is, filling the void that the Western brands have left. So you sort of hit two birds with one stone if you go for the both of them.
I guess for many of our viewers right now, they're wondering what can they do, because as Muhammad was mentioning, we do feel helpless. And there have been many courses of action that the Muslim can take or the public should be taking right now. According to you, as someone who is involved in the space, what is the best course of action? What can we do? I guess on multiple levels, from the individual level to the state level. What can we do or should we be doing right now?
Well, again, this sort of depends on your own network and your own level.
Capacity.
But generally speaking, we should be reaching out to our politicians, our representatives. If you're, a part of a university, if you're a student, writing to your university, do you have Confucius Institutes in your school? Do you have students and scholars associations in your school? These are direct arms of the Chinese consulate and embassies into Australian institutions, for example, or other Western institutions. Make a video, talk about it, have these discussions. There are, people making comics, people making cartoons, raising awareness. Don't buy Chinese products. I know that's sort of difficult. So if you're buying, say, 10 Chinese products a day, buy 5. Cut
it's almost impossible to avoid the whole made in China brand. And I actually wanted to ask you about that. A boycott China course of action. For instance, against the Israeli
BDS
occupiers, we have seen BDS boycott divestment sanction to boycott Israeli products such as SodaStream and various
Israeli dates
others.
is a big one.
Israeli dates. Well, is a boycott feasible, practical, effective against China when we're talking about a huge, superpower
manufacturer?
I think we have to take it step by step. So, for example, we had the Olympics campaign, and so, for example, we couldn't sanction or we couldn't
cancel the Olympics.
We couldn't cancel the Olympics, but at least there was a 40% decrease,
Mm-hmm.
and it was the least watched Olympics ever in history.
Mm-hmm.
So that's something.
Mm-hmm.
So obviously, like I mentioned, we probably at this time, if we want to have a mission to end it all, that's probably not going to be, but
Mm-hmm.
step by step.
Mm-hmm.
So there are brands out there. There have been brand campaigns against protests targeting not necessarily the bigger brands, but sort of the smaller brands that are only just getting into the Chinese market. It's
Mm-hmm.
easier for them to pull out.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it does work, and that is one part of the bigger picture. So
Mm-hmm.
whatever you can. I would personally say target one brand and stick to that,
Mm-hmm.
and then you have other groups target other brands.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, that is one way of going about things.
So I guess with the fashion industry, I guess studies were coming out saying that almost the entire fashion industry is complicit in forced labor, sourcing cotton from occupied East Turkestan.
Nike, Adidas,
We're seeing
Zara, H&M,
major
Uniqlo,
companies, and they did take a stance.
Yeah.
I guess perhaps because of the consumer awareness and the pressure that we did place on the brands. But and in response, I believe Nike was boycotted, H&M was boycotted, Adidas was boycotted by the Chinese themselves. After Nike came out, made a statement, H&M made a statement. What can, I guess, the consumer from a fashion consumer, someone who buys clothes that unfortunately almost 90% of the time, forgive my statistics, made in China.
Yeah.
What can we do?
So just remember, you have to put it in your mind that you are literally wearing the blood of your fellow Muslim brothers and sisters when you buy those clothes. You're paying for their blood, and you're essentially pumping and you're driving that concentration camp system. You know, the cotton industry. So you do your best, and you just put that in the back of your mind, because even with the faces that we're seeing with these files, you know, it's very easy to say 1 million, 2 million, 3 million, but try and scroll through 2,884 images. It's a very difficult thing to do, but just constantly be just aware of this.
Just that, I guess we mentioned the youngest girl. She was 15 years old. I think her name is Rahila Umar. That just breaks my heart. You got a girl named after the second Khalif Umar bin Khattab, and she's in these camps, a detainee, a prisoner. La ilaha illallah. And you're just like, what is going on?
And a lot of these crimes is sort of like from the movie Minority Report.
That is,
it's literally like this person could do something.
Chinese statesman actually racially discriminated against a whole people and saying, we locked them up because they look like they're about to do crimes. And there's a clip that people can watch on YouTube of him actually saying that. And that's literally the movie of Minority. That's literally the plot of Minority Report, arresting people before there's any crime on the suspicion that they're going to do crime.
So imagine like an Australian politician or American politician said that. It'll be like, oh, that politician would be cancelled. Racism, have him fired.
Rightfully so called out.
Yeah. But
Guilty.
now what? No, we need to work with China on human rights. Like their crimes, it's craziness. Now we understand, you know, you're going to have every culture, every people, you're going to have, you know, bad people, but you don't lock up millions and millions of people. It would be the equivalent of, let's just say, a couple of Australian ISIS fighters went over to Syria, and then all of us are locked up for their crimes.
It's literally no different to Nazi Germany. Exactly the same thing. Based on the ethnicity, we're seeing one woman, one of the women, she was put into prison because her son was religious. Like, never mind her state of religiosity, because her son didn't smoke or drink. What is this stupidity? It's just like complete, you know, madness in terms of oppression on a scale we've never seen before. But going back to the clothing and the fashion industry, I guess it gives a whole nother meaning to the dua of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam when you put on new clothes. When he says, Allahumma inni a'udhu bika min sharrihi wa min sharri ma suni'a lah. I seek refuge in its evil and from the evil of which it was manufactured or created. And I guess for the viewers or the consumers, ask your retailers, where are they getting their cotton from? How do you make sure that what I'm wearing is free from Xinjiang cotton or from potential forced labor, which is very hard at the end of the day. So I ask Allah to protect us, protect our clothing, and make us not complicit.
Replace it with something that's better.
Because if we're not buying it, then those companies can't sell it. They'll be forced to change their ways. So we can't necessarily blame there is blame on the brands, but at the same time, we're still buying from those brands. If we stop, then that system stops as well.
We need to put pressure. We need to put pressure. Another point you've raised, Brother Arslan, which was very important, I think, is as much as this is a message for us to take heed of what the Uyghur people are going through, it's also another message for us to realize the privilege that we have to practice our faith.
Yeah, so the Dawah's perspective of this, you know, regardless, you know, I know that inshallah, if our brothers and sisters suffer in this way and they are martyred in this way, alhamdulillah, like we're Muslims, so we believe in akhirah. Their akhirah, like for them, you know, how long are we on this earth for? So they, inshallah, their situation is guaranteed. But for us, we saw why these people are going into the camps, because they prayed, because they had hijab, because they had beards. But we living in Australia, you know, we don't have Australian cops. Hey, shave your beard off. Is that the situation? We all be locked up right now. And we still don't pray. We still, Allah is not going to ask you about this. You don't pray for your own salvation. You know, you don't follow the sunnah. Where's your hijab? And people are being locked up for hijab. So this, in a way, the Uyghurs are essentially giving dawah to the world as well, because
in their suffering.
Yeah, in their suffering, because the Uyghurs are standing up against China. That's the only reason why they're in the camps. Because if they followed communism, if they gave up their religious values, if they gave up Islam, if they gave up Salah, if they gave up the bead, if they gave up hijab, there'd be no need for concentration camps. And we're here, no one's stopping us, no one's blocking us from following our deen. And yet we're just going to blatantly miss our appointments with Allah.
It's powerful. It's very powerful. And I guess it speaks volumes in terms of, like, we can speak about the physical manifestation of what's taking place right now, but there is a ghaibi, you know, there is an unseen manifestation or metaphysical manifestation of what every Muslim should take heed from. You know, these people, I think there's a beautiful verse in the Quran where Allah says, إِلَّا الْمُسْتَضْعَفِينَ, except for the oppressed from the men, women and children, لا يستطيعون حيلة ولا يهتدون سبيلا, that they couldn't find a way out of their oppression. فأولئك عسى الله أن يعفو عنهم. Allah will pardon these people. You know, Allah is afu, Allah is the pardoning, the forgiving. So when we see these people, you know, we ask Allah to give them a speedy entrance into paradise, a speedy entrance into paradise. And while their dunya is the sijn, while their world is a prison for them right now, the akhirah, I'll ask Allah to give them a hasty, speedy entrance into Jannah. All the Uyghur people, for their suffering and for what they've went through, they've experienced the worst of this world. But you know, the person who suffered the worst in this world, literally from the hadith, we know the person who suffered the worst in this world, he'll go into Jannah for just a split moment. He'll forget everything. Everything will be
of the world
minuscule. He won't even remember it. I didn't even experience any hardship. Yet for the ones that are doing the oppression, you know, in the akhirah, we don't even need to go there. They know, like, that the punishment is severe for what they are doing, inflicting our brothers and sisters. But I guess
on that note, Brother Arslan, I wanted to ask you, as you've mentioned before, and with some personal experiences and family members in these camps, how do you find solace in your heart? I mean, from a prior conversation, to recall that what we had is, I asked you, how do you feel in putting your face out there in what's going on? As we said, China's it's mass surveillance on a grand scale, and it'd be very easy for them to access you on Australian waters as well. And what was remarkable as to how you responded is, I said, how do you feel putting your face out there, and so on and so forth, and you know, at the risk of putting your family members in further pain and trouble. And you said, you simply put this, there's always akhirah. And that, I went home and I would just, to this day, I really try to sit with that. You said, there's always akhirah, subhanAllah. But how do you find comfort? If you could expand on that, how do you find comfort knowing that this is going on to your literal blood relatives?
Yeah, so I just want to put the names of those, like my direct family members. So my wife's family. So her father Abdul Rashid Tokhti, her mother Tajul Qadir, her younger brother Ahmad Abdul Rashid, and her other brother Muhammad Ali Abdul Rashid. For the past 5 years, we haven't heard a word from them, whether they're alive or dead. and they are in the camps arbitrarily. They are illegally incarcerated. And as I mentioned, there is an akhirah. This is our test. Our test, that their test is the concentration camps. Our test is what we're going to do. And brother, as you mentioned, no matter what we go through, if we enjoyed and we were entertained in this world, the moment, may Allah, protect us, the moment we're in Jahannam, we forget all the entertainment that we had with the hadith and these people. And inshallah, if we do end up in Jannah, we will actually be jealous of those who suffered, wishing that we were them, and then wishing that we could go back on the earth that we could be cut up into thousands of pieces so that we could see the rewards that they received. So just remember, life is very short. We could be gone tomorrow. We could be gone, whenever. But akhirah is forever. Concentration camps, holocausts, genocides, murders, school shootings. These are moments. This is Allah's test. Things go up and down. You will have moments where it's all good. But alhamdulillah, I thank Allah for putting me in this position so that, again, working for my akhirah to gain the rewards.
How beautiful is that? How beautiful is the faith of Islam, which gives us solace in the worst of situations. عَجَبًا لِأَمْرِ الْمُؤْمِنِ. The Prophet said, strange is the fear of the believer.
Exactly, yeah.
Because even in the worst of situations, if we look at what is taking place through a materialistic lens, this is hopelessness, this is devastation, despair, depression, grief. If for the Muslim we say, the sabirin, إِنَّمَا يُوَفَّى الصَّابِرُونَ أَجْرَهُمْ بِغَيْرِ حِسَابٍ. Their reward, those that are going through this right now, the brother that wrote that comment, oh my heart, do not break. Ya Allah, the reward, we ask Allah to give him a great reward on the Day of Judgment. It's a beautiful, beautiful, I guess, note for us to end on that. Yes, it is difficult. It is hard. It is something which should bring pain to our hearts. But that's not the end of the road. The end of the road is the akhirah, where we ask Allah to allow the Uyghur Muslims and all the Muslims that are suffering around the world, wherever they may be, Syria, Kashmir, Yemen, wherever they are around the world. Too many to list, unfortunately. That Allah grants them an easy, swift entrance into paradise.
Ameen.
Brother Arslan, before we end, any final comments?
Again, everyone, just do your bit. Your fellow brothers and sisters are suffering in East Turkestan. Follow the steps that we said. Do your bit. I mean, wherever people, and alhamdulillah for the OnePath network. Like the way I have been able to, or the way that we're able to talk about this Uyghur genocide, I've been on many channels from A to Z. And as you mentioned, the situation of the Muslim is strange. If I were to talk like this on BBC, it's like, what's this guy talking about? I'd never be invited again. Alhamdulillah, may Allah reward you guys. And please show your support to the OnePath network, because this is, a very important channel, whether it be, for against Islamophobia, and other issues. We Muslims can walk proud because we have channels and mediums like this. There are other channels out there, documenting oppression against Muslims, 5 Pillars, Islam 21C, Cage, all you guys, because you guys are out there. So whether it be Western media or the Chinese or others that are Islamophobic against us, they sort of have to think twice before they have to say anything. So, for example, if you guys remember, with the Ukrainian invasion, one was like, "Oh, they're not typical refugees. They're white. They're Christian."
white.
So they sort of have
Christian,
to think.
European,
So they have to sort of hold back. So even that, this is why it's great to have these mediums.
And we're only able to do it through the people at home that are watching this. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for supporting us and for us to be able to host these conversations. And inshallah, our aim is always to do this work in the hopes that it acts as a sadaqah jariyah on us. And when we pass that, people can benefit from these talks. So if you would like to support us, you can do. The links will be below in this video, inshallah.
Keep the Uyghur people in your dua. And until next time.
Assalamu alaikum.